We'll close up by looking at some special designations that can actually get thrown at you after you think you're all done, after you think you've finished your prison sentence. Suddenly, the government can come along and say, well, we want to try something else. These are pretty rare in practice. This one, the first one we'll look at, is a long term offender designation. And really, what this is the government comes along, and even though you finished your prison sentence, they say, Judge, we'd like to make a special exception here. Even though the original sentence that this person was given way back when is expired, they're about to be released into the community, and we'd like to try and do something special for them. Judge says, well, what's that? You say a long term offender designation. Essentially, what that is it's kind of like having a long probation tacked onto the end of your sentence. Probation orders have a maximum of 3 years, so this isn't like a regular probation order. This can last up to 10 years, and it has conditions on it, the possibility for conditions that are actually heavier than a regular probation order. So what's going on here is essentially the government is trying to tell the judge, this person is really dangerous if we don't watch them closely, so please let us keep them on a leash with this long-term probation order so we can keep a close eye on them to protect the public. Why might this be significant? Well, if you have a probation order that might have conditions in it that say, for example, you can't go near a schoolyard for whatever reason. Let's say you're some sort of child sex offender and your sentence eventually expires. Probation order only lasts for 3 years. And here the government might say, look, we really want these conditions to last forever if we could. So could you just make this 10 years where this person can't be near a schoolyard and where they have to check in with a therapist every month to talk about how their progress is going in suppressing their horrific urges and all this stuff? That's where this kind of long-term offender designation might kick in. More serious is a dangerous offender designation. This is Section 753 of the Criminal Code. If you're really, really, really violent, then even after you've been released, the prosecution can seek a dangerous offender designation for you. Essentially, what this is a life sentence in jail imposed not of what you've actually done, but because of what you're likely to do. This is really contrary to the whole principle of sentencing. Sentencing is supposed to be like, well, we're going to punish the bad thing you did. This saying we're going to punish the things that if we don't punish you, you're going to do. So you can see how exceptional this is and being generally contrary to the principles of criminal law. It's essentially the government saying, look, this guy hasn't killed anyone yet, but we all know where this is going to go, so can we please just keep this guy in jail forever? You might be surprised to find that sometimes the people for whom the government seeks this dangerous offender designation actually want to agree to this. They're like, yes, Judge, this is really, you let me out there, I am probably going to kill someone. They're right. Maybe we should just keep me in jail. So these people often are really, really extreme cases. You do not see this happen very often. Now, there's one last point I want to address, and this is a question that often comes up where people want to know, well, look, if you only get sentenced at the time of your trial and you've been waiting for your trial for maybe 6 months, maybe a year, then shouldn't you get like some kind of credit for time served? Yes. Now, what's complicated about all this, and this is controversial, it's that, remember, your parole clock starts to tick only once you're sentenced. So let's say you're sentenced to 42 months. That was the example we had before. You're eligible for parole after 14 months, right? Now, if you've been waiting your trial for 12 months, you've been in jail for 12 months waiting your trial, then you might say, well, shouldn't that 12 months also count against my parole clock? No, it does not. And that's partly why courts are allowed to assign a value for your time served that's actually 1.5 times the amount of time, because that's supposed to counteract the fact that the 12 months you served, if you make them count for 18 months, then hopefully they'll counteract the fact that your parole clock wasn't ticking this whole time. But a lot of people don't like this. They say, well, then criminals will try and game the system. I think people who say that don't really understand how the parole clock works, don't really understand this ramification, but people still maintain it anyway. In the past, it used to be that your time served waiting trial was counted on a 2-for-1 basis before, under Stephen Harper's government a few years ago, the Parliament passed a law saying, no, it's 1-for-1, and very, very exceptionally, it can be 1.5-for-1. But now in practice, this exceptional 1.5-for-1 is what judges pretty much have to apply in order to account for the fact that your parole clock isn't going. There's also other reasons why credit for time served makes sense for it to be more than 1-for-1, because while you're awaiting your trial, you're ineligible in most places for being admissible to programs, all the kinds of things that are supposed to rehabilitate you in prison. Really, you're not doing any of those things. You're just sitting there in what's called dead time. And it's considered by most criminals to be much worse than regular prison time. You'll run into criminals who want to plead guilty just so they can get the court stuff behind them, so they can get into the regular programs in either prison or the penitentiary. So it's a complicated question. It's controversial. A lot of people get very up in arms about it, but that's the basics of it.